Welcome back. We're glad to have you back here at the NOSA Group on our YouTube channel. We are glad to be able to expand our community over here onto YouTube and glad to have you as a subscriber. So if you haven't subscribed, feel free to do so now, as well as click that alert bell over here on the left-hand corner and get updates on the latest videos that we have out. So it's officially February, and we know just like February every year, it goes by quickly. So this month, over the next coming weeks, we're going to pack in a lot of good information that is something you can use really in any business, but we're going to tailor it a little bit to healthcare staffing. But today's topic is about negotiation. And I have enjoyed talking about this topic because I reached a place over my journey in entrepreneurship to realize that pretty much everything is negotiable. And once you kind of settle your mindset on that, when you go into different situations, whether it be professionally or personally, and you're thinking, oh, this isn't working out, or maybe I need to make some adjustments, you kind of go back to the thought process of everything is negotiable. All right, so let's get started here. Tips on how to negotiate. So negotiation is a great part of life. It's something we use all the time. Some use it more than others, but it's a tool not only used in business, but definitely in our day-to-day activities. So this is why it's important to keep in mind some tips and tricks to implement when you are negotiating. So some ways you can get ready is do your research. So find out what your client needs. Try to get to know them as much as possible. And of course, use our favorite friend, Google, to get some of that information. So Google, LinkedIn, social media websites will give you a plethora of information about what's going on or might be happening with your client. Another great resource is associations and organizations that tailor to our industry. So, like your SIAs or your American Staffing Association, that do an amazing job of providing updates about changes, trends, acquisitions, new businesses in the industry, so that way, when you meet with potential clients, you kind of have some answers to some of their questions and then some information that you obtain about their business. So many questions as you can think of. In the first stages of the negotiation process, you want to think through so it can help you build a rapport and confidence. Number two, and this was one, like I said in the beginning, is something that you really have to come to a resolve about. Prepare to fail. So, not all negotiations are a win win, but that doesn't mean you can't go into a negotiation with that mindset. So, making sure that you're prepared to say, hey, this is where I decide to move in a different direction or not participate or not take that client or that contract opportunity. You want to think about other factors that may have contributed to that, such as, is it the right time? And is it the right circumstances, or is it better to position yourself for bigger or larger opportunities? And just make sure that when you leave those situations that aren't always successful initially, you don't feel defeated. Set the tone. So this is where we're going to hang out during this YouTube session the most. You want to set the tone. So part of getting the research in the beginning and getting ready and preparing a list and preparing to fail is that you want to set the tone on how the conversation is going to go. It's a very different conversation to have when you tell someone, hey, I'm a staffing agency, we're looking for new clients. We would love for you to be a part of our list of potential clients, and this is the type of services that we offer. That's different than to say, hey, we're the largest, greatest, best staffing agency in the region. We're nurse owned. We have this types of capabilities. We offer these type of services. We see, based on information we've obtained, that you're having issues or challenges with this area of your business. It could be night shift, it could be weekends, it could be certain positions. So making it clear, you're making sure that you're clear and you're open and respectful to negotiation is always great, but setting the tone is really key. And you don't want to deviate into a bunch of different conversations. Focus on what your agency offers is different, what's in it for the client to work with you, and then offer the opportunity, of course, to negotiate in bill rates or negotiate in terms if that's something that they want to do. And come to a resolution and already kind of have in your mind where you want to be. So where you want to be around bill rates, where you want to be with regards to different types of positions that you can or that you can fill for the client, any terms as far as conversions and things of that nature. So you want to have a clear game plan when you go to meet the client so that they understand you're serious, you're professional, you know what's happening in the industry, you're clear on different trends, and that you're prepared to provide them with optimal services. And then always make sure that you create a good, comfortable environment. Once you have turned the contract, you always want to check in. You always want to make sure that they're getting the types of experiences that they want with your employees, that there aren't any issues, that when there are issues, there's an easy pipeline to communicating with you or one of your team members to resolve them. And over time, that'll really benefit you. And then, of course, being easygoing with your client and maintaining your professionalism. So now that you've done your research, you kind of set the tone, you've had the conversation with your potential client, now it's time to make the offer. So if you are the first one to make the offer, so if the offer is from you to them versus them to you, then you really have an advantage in the negotiation. You want to provide clarity, and this is where in your contracts, and we have a couple of videos on our channel about contracts, you want to be as detailed as possible. You want to talk about cancellation rates, overtime rates, communication, how to send the billing, how you plan to do the invoicing, if you use any sort of special or additional technology for scheduling shifts and things like that. So you really want to spell out either within the contract or a cover letter that has a contract in it what you're going to do, how you're going to do it. Hey, I have these types of insurances, or I have these types of special qualifications. It might be that you're a woman, a WBE, a woman business enterprise. It could be that you're minority owned business enterprise, any sort of a veteran zone, any sort of um, special specialties that you have. You want to include that in the communication because that potential client could need to work with different types of businesses for different reasons. So you want to always highlight yourself. So with that being said, you want to make sure that you've put in your contract or in your offer, kind of a recap of what you can offer as a NOSA, and then also follow up with whatever you propose. And for some clients, this is a bit of a segue. For some clients, they may ask you to propose something to them. So like some of your state federal contracts and things of that nature, you're not initially talking directly to the person or the decision maker. You may be talking to a third party, like a contracting specialist or contracting manager. So you have to propose what you can offer. So that's a great way to bring it all together. And you can use those same types of proposals on the non-government contracting side of the industry as well, because it provides a little bit more depth many of the time beyond just making an offer and sending over the contract. You can kind of touch on some of the other clients that you work with and things of that nature. So in your proposal, you want to make sure that that you're clear, that you provide an expectation of, how long the decision making process will be for them. And some of this stuff you may ask ahead of time. And then you want to speak wisely. So you don't need to speak a lot. If it's an email, it doesn't have to be an elaborate email. It just needs to be clear and to the point. If you're talking to them over the phone, same thing, clear and to the point, kind of highlighting the benefits again about working with you as an agency owner, and then give it some time. So the next step is make open-ended questions. So if your contract is submitted, so you're submitted for whatever your proposed positions are, and you're waiting, the client might have some questions. So you want to be prepared as far as what types of questions those would be. So some questions are typically, around the bill rate. So some clients really want to negotiate the bill rate. Maybe this rate isn't where they're accustomed to being. Maybe they've worked with other agencies. And some factors that you want to think about when you're adjusting your bill rate is one, as a NOSA, you should have a bill rate range. So your rates shouldn't necessarily be one specific number versus a range that kind of covers your expenses, keeps you within your profit margin. So I encourage people to do kind of high low bill rates. And then the other thing is, if they want to negotiate the rate with any sort of changes to the actual bill rate or overtime rate or anything of that nature, or have more specific requests, you want to think about the long term, right? So if, say, I was billing $50, they wanted it to be 45, that was still in my range, but I'd start to think through, what are the other advantages about this contract? One, if 45 is in my bill rate range, that's fine, but I'm kind of in the 50 space. So what else could the client provide me that would make it okay for a period of time to stay at the $45 bill rate, for example? And that could be access to other facilities. So that's part of doing your research. So having access or exclusivity at that particular facility, or access to sister facilities, is a great thing. Opening other doors. If it's new facilities being built, all those things take into account, because ultimately, as a NOSA, you really look to have repeat business. So to access that repeat business easier, it's a lot better than you having to kind of start that marketing process over again, having to reach out, do your research, do the cold calling, do the presentations, versus, hey, this client has facilities in another state or facilities in another town in the same state. Is there opportunity there? So that's always a great way to really negotiate for yourself in the future. And then also, you want to think about, is it competitive? So sometimes negotiations, like I say, could be win-win, win-lose, but the goal is always win-win. If you have data, which I encourage you to have, that says, hey, we're within our range, this is kind of how we stay competitive in our market to pay our staff, competitive rates, then proving why you, or kind of how, not exactly how, but kind of how you came up to that number based off of market rates, and what, maybe some other facilities or agencies might be offering, that kind of creates a good case for you to say, hey, no, $50 is where we need to be. Based on this data that we've provided, this is kind of the factors that we use to determine this pay rate. And then at that point, you kind of have to leave it in their hands to make the decision that they feel is best. The other thing is, don't denigrate your services. If you have some negative aspects about your products or services come up, don't agree. Try to convince them otherwise, like giving contextualized response or a specific response for the issue. So one of the big issues that I've seen that touches on this a little bit is the piece around, like, how many healthcare professionals you have access to staff. So, like, what does your applicant pool look like, and or your technology. So in our industry, probably over the last 3 or 4 years, probably, there's been a lot of technology. So there's been a big influx of this on-demand staffing, on-demand pay element that's happening at the agency level, at the facility level, and it becomes a little bit of a norm. So if you're a new NOSA and maybe you don't have that on-demand technology, and maybe you're still doing paper timesheets, you really want to think about what else your agency offers, if that's not something that you're able or ready to provide for your employees or to your clients. So, like, some clients may want, oh, well, how many people do you have on your applicant pool for these types of positions? One, think about the whole picture. So when someone asks you how many applicants do you have access to the NOSA group, you have access to the NOSA job network. So there's a lot of other pieces that can pull in a large group of individuals. And then you also have access to friend groups or referral groups or group chats that you may be a part of. within the community. So those are all opportunities. And some ways to kind of turn the conversation around is to focus on the positive, focus on what you're able to do, and then touch on maybe some things that you plan to do in the future. So an example would be if you're still doing paper timesheets, you may say, hey, at this time, we're still doing paper timesheets. You want to get the signatures, but second quarter 2023, our intention is to introduce into our business this particular app that allows us to enter the shifts and notifications be sent out to staff, and maybe allows the scheduler at your facility to do the same. So you always want to be able to turn it around and not kind of get discouraged, because sometimes it's just a question. It's not necessarily to say that you're not a good fit as much as it's just a question. So I wouldn't read too much into them. Again, give concise numbers. If you're discussing terms or numbers, be concrete and not a range. And in this example, you can have a range for your bill rate that you have, okay? But I wouldn't give a client a range of a bill rate. So whatever number you decide on is your number. But if they want to go lower and you still are interested in getting the contract based on the numbers that you crunch for your business, your operational costs, any sort of overhead, employee expenses, office expenses, and you're still being able to meet the profit margin that you've said, you can have a range for that. But I wouldn't give ranges to the client. I would give hard numbers. And then finally, create a win-win opportunity. So both parties should feel like they got something of interest from the negotiation. So you always want to think about things in a different perspective. And sometimes we have to talk to other people to get that perspective. So being open to that is always great. And think about things like the long term. Don't just focus on the numbers. Think about, your ability to do like conversions for employees to become permanent, or different things like that, exclusivity in the contracts or at that particular facility. Think about things that they have sister properties or properties in other states that you could potentially staff. So opening the door in the beginning and doing your research and making sure that you're setting the tone and doing a good offer really helps you feel comfortable when you may be in a place where there's really heavy negotiations around the terms and what the expectation is, how much access to applicants you have, and how big of a network do you have. So you want to think through all of that ahead of time so that once you're in that situation, you feel really comfortable in it. And of course, definitely bounce a couple of ideas from people that you trust, their opinion, as far as, hey, do you think this is a good idea? Do you think this is a good contract? And really touch on, as an individual, what you plan to do in the future, because a big part of that ties in. So like if you're trying to do, something in the long-term care community or something in the healthcare or hospital community, having those previous business referrals from clients that you've worked with for a period of times really helps you in solidifying that. So making sure that you do those things and think them through and do your research, I can't stress enough, really helps you in moving forward on potential contracts and creating a win-win opportunity for negotiating. So thank you guys so much for joining us today. And like I said, we're over here at the NOSA Group. If you're interested in finding out more information about us at the NOSA Group, feel free to check us out at www.thenosagroup.com. And you'll find more information about our digital downloads, some of our projects and upcoming events. As well, if you want to continue the conversation, feel free to drop in the comments some tools, tips, and things that you use to negotiate your contracts or even negotiate with employees. So thanks again, as always. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel.